Love you guys.
Good morning. My name is Kara. I'm Associate Pastor of Hope Church, and I'm so encouraged that you are joining us for this time as we gather together in fellowship. We gather together remembering who it is that we are as a people of faith. Even in our different corners of the earth where we are right now, we get to join together, join our hearts. And over these next few weeks, we're not going to be asking you in our sermons to take giant leaps of faith or stop wandering in the desert and do that thing that God is calling you to, but we're going to focus on some of the basic tenets of our faith, the basic beliefs. We're going to ask you to be comfortable, to take comfort in the truths that it is that we know, to take comfort in who we know our God to be. And so we're leading a sermon series that is called The Heart of the Matter, where we're going to look at those truths, look at what it is that really matters as we explore Jesus' teachings and Jesus' interactions with those he loved. And so this week, we're going to look at the heart of the matter, which is Jesus' gift of peace. After Jesus had been crucified, the Gospel of John tells of Jesus' appearance to his disciples, and in John 20, it says this: "When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked out of fear for their lives, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.'" I don't know if you have noticed my Book It button. I am wearing it for a reason today. I went to kindergarten in 1985, and that was the same year the Book It program began to exist. And so this was kind of just a basic truth of public school, was that every month you'd have a chance to read so many minutes. I don't know if it was 60 minutes or 100 minutes. And at the end, if you met your goal, your teacher would give you a certificate for the best thing ever when you're in elementary school, which is a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut. And so though this is not my first Book It button by any means, they weren't this cool at the beginning, as soon as I earned this holographic one, I was like, oh yeah, this is going in my memory bin. And it took me about 5 seconds to find it last night. So that's how important it is. It's at the top of the memory bin. Well, I loved the Book It program so much when I was in school. A, because I really like to read, so to get a free personal pan pizza was like awesome, and because I was already reading anyway. Second reason I loved it was because I found out eventually, maybe when I was about 9 years old, that if you read and met your goal every month of the school year, at the end of the year you would be eligible for a free ticket to Six Flags Great America. And that was only about a half an hour from my hometown, so I was all about the Six Flag tickets. Around that same time is also when I realized my mom trusted me a lot, and so she would basically sign anything I put in front of her. I am proud to say I never missed a reading goal after that the rest of my school career. But one year of this stands out to me. When I was about 9 years old, I don't think it was because I was brave enough. I think it was probably because I had finally reached 3.5 feet tall, which is the minimum height you need to ride some roller coasters. It took me a little longer than most. But I remember my dad accompanying me to Great America. And we went there, and I don't know who decided, whether it was him or me, that this was going to be the year I rode my first roller coaster. And the one we had picked was the Demon. And it is known as one of the first roller coasters in the country to have a double corkscrew. So to me, first roller coaster, this was the real deal. It had a big hill, it had corkscrews, it had tunnels, you went upside down, all the things. It was the real deal. The Demon. So I hit 3.5 feet tall, I won this Great America ticket, and I don't know how it actually happened, but how I remember was that like we got in line and then I freaked out. And then we turned around and I was like, no, I'm not gonna ride a roller coaster today. I can't do it, I can't do it. And then we get in line again, and I only remember my dad laughing and enjoying the time with me. I'm sure I was an absolute delight going back and forth, but somehow, some way, he probably convinced me we were going to stay in line. Maybe we had just waited in line long enough that there was no turning back. You know, you've already invested that much time. whatever it was, we decided that we had hit the point that I was doing this whether I liked it or not. And I was leaning towards not liking it at this point. We got in line. We stepped in that little coaster car when it was our turn, and they put the harness down, and I immediately regretted my decision. It took exactly 5 seconds of ascending that first hill that seemed to be going nowhere but heaven, because there was no track in sight. We could not see what was happening. There was no sign of what was next. It was just that click, 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 inching forward to who knows what. I knew this was going to be horrible, and I knew that I was absolutely terrified. I had decided in that moment that it was a huge mistake. In that moment of absolute fear and panic, I had no choice but to hold on tight, to close my eyes, and just pray for it to end. I wish I didn't remember that feeling so clearly, but I do. Because that kind of fear, that kind of holding on and just praying something will end, did not end that day at Six Flags. I've had the opportunity other times in life to feel that same fear. Sometimes I'm fortunate enough for that fear to be as short-lived as a 30-second roller coaster. But other times, I have trudged through seasons of life that felt like they would never end, like there was no possible way for them ever to get better. As we talk about peace, about finding peace regardless of our circumstances, I'm reminded that as Christians, it seems we should be the most laid back, cool, calm, and collected people on earth. We live under this Easter promise, don't we? This Easter promise of eternal hope. We live under the promise of a God who loves us no matter what, a God who is for us, and a God who is with us. We live with countless testimonies of those who came before us and survived impossible situations and even came out on the other side to talk about how their faith or prayer or love got them through. Yet, living into these promises doesn't make us immune to doubt, does it? Living into these promises doesn't protect us from fear, unfortunately. Because even if we've heard 1,000,001 stories about how God showed up, about how God's love made absolutely no sense, but in retrospect was present, was sustaining, I don't know if you're like me, but I tend to think, but what if that isn't true for me? What if God doesn't show up here and now? Right? Because 1,000,000 stories, 1,000,001 stories don't matter as much as the one story that belongs to me. 1,000,000 stories that go right have no bearing as much as that one story that belongs to me. Although we live as a people of faith, we also live as people in a hurting and broken world. We live as people who have faced fear more often than we wish we did. When a friend of mine died a few years ago of ovarian cancer, she was way too young. She left behind a newborn baby boy, and I remember standing in worship singing this song, Trying To. And the lyrics said, "This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet." And those words would repeat over and over again in the song, "God, you've never failed me yet." And one Sunday in particular, I stood there next to her widow, and I couldn't say the words. Because God had failed me. It felt absolutely as though God had abandoned this situation. You have absolutely failed me in this situation, God, and there's absolutely no way to possibly make sense of this or wrap it up in a nice package and call it love. God, it feels as though you have absolutely failed this man and this baby left behind and me. As Jesus' disciples sat reeling in that upper room after Jesus' crucifixion, After Jesus was killed, it seems they may have had some of these same feelings. When they had heard that Jesus' body was no longer in the tomb, they went running. They had that hope. They were ready for it to make sense to them. But still, it didn't make sense. They could not understand. The body was not there, but what? Now, unable to leave this locked room for fear of their own lives, what was there to understand anyway? This guy they had followed for 3 years, who was to be the King of all kings, was killed. What were they thinking in believing in this impossibility, and where could they possibly go from here? It felt like they had been failed too. John 20, verse 19 says, "When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of their lives, Jesus came. Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. And the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them again, 'Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you.' When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, 'Receive the Holy Spirit.' But Thomas, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples went and said, 'Thomas, we have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'I can't.' He said, 'I can't unless I see the mark of the nails in his hand and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand on his side. I cannot believe.'" Jesus was gracious even to Thomas. In verse 26, it says, "A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said again, 'Peace be with you.' And then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe.' Thomas answered him, believing, 'My Lord, my God.' Jesus said to him, 'Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe.'" Jesus came and stood among his friends, among his terrified, doubting, angry, and confused disciples. Jesus had been unrecognizable to some, but his friends saw him. Jesus no longer spent time trying to help his disciples understand. He had spent his whole 3 years with them trying to help them understand, but it was just not to be understood. No words could help them understand, as they were in survival mode. They had experienced trauma, something going not how they expected, not how they wanted, maybe their worst nightmare. Jesus didn't waste time telling them what was coming or how this would get better. Jesus offered them 4 words. Peace be with you. He said, "May peace be with you. May the peace that I have in God be yours. May I impart this to you." How we long for the understanding as human beings, don't we? We desperately want answers, a glimpse of the future, evidence that we're going to be okay. And we aren't given that gift of understanding most times. Would any words really do it justice? Would any words help us to once and for all understand? The death of my friend to cancer will never make sense. It will never be fair. It will never be right. Nothing can make it make sense or justify it. But I can choose to accept the gift of peace. The gift Jesus gives to us is peace. He stood there before his disciples, arms wide open, exposing the evidence of his crucifixion, the evidence of the very worst thing, and the words he spoke were, "Peace be with you." And Thomas wasn't there the first time Jesus appeared, and when his friends told him what he experienced, Thomas said, "You can't tell me that the worst thing didn't happen. It did. You can't possibly say anything that would allow me to believe this will ever feel better." You've been there too, haven't you? Rock bottom, no light at the end of the tunnel, no hope. Certain that there's no way we might ever again feel joy or peace or comfort. And yet, Jesus stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." He opened his arms wide and he said, "Whatever it takes. May you see me, may you know me, and may I pass on to you peace." Jesus stood there with his friends in the pit of despair, in the midst of their fear and their doubt, in their absolute panic, and said, "Peace be with you." As I rode that roller coaster at 9 years old, ascending the first hill, I had no idea what was coming. But after the tipping point, my stomach dropping, certain that the harness would not hold me, and I actually wasn't tall enough to be safe, flying through the tunnel of blinking lights, knowing how bad it actually was, experiencing the worst thing, living through the reality is actually more terrifying than the anticipation of what I thought it would be like. My breath caught in my throat and I couldn't even scream. Grieving for my friend's widow, and their son comes in waves, and it's been almost 5 years. We're not preaching about getting out of your comfort zone or quitting that wandering in the desert, taking leaps of faith. But friends, find comfort in the midst of fear, in the midst of uncertainty and unknown. Find peace. For there is nothing I can say to grant you understanding. There's so much we don't know fully. While we desperately want answers, a glimpse at the future evidence that we're going to be okay, I can point you to Jesus. I can point you to the gift that Jesus gave his disciples in their greatest uncertainty. Jesus stood before his closest friends, arms wide open, and said, "Come and see. Touch. Do whatever it is you need to do to believe, to have faith, and from that, may you know peace." Jesus breathed on his friends and said, "God has given me this gift of peace, and I give it to you, for you to give to others." More than a breath. That's how they express it in Scripture, but Jesus just exuded this out of everything he did. He shared this peace by his very existence. Simply as the air we breathe, may we be vessels of peace in our homes, in our conference calls, in our work, in our service, in our running of errands. With each breath, may we let go of fear and uncertainty and doubt. May we wrap closer and tighter in our favorite blankets and breathe the peace of God. Peace is a universally good and gracious thing. And though we are physically distanced right now, let us not be socially distanced from one another. Exuding peace can be as simple as a text message. Who is it that you know that right now could use the gift of peace? I want you to take a moment here to consider. Maybe write in the comments or write in the chat just the first name of someone that God brings to mind that could use peace to wash over them this morning. No, we can't be physically maybe with these people. Let us socially be together with them. Let us in prayer be with them. And I encourage you even to take out your phone and just send a quick text message. All you have to say is, may peace be yours today. May you have peace today, or whatever it is, the language that you would use. It's simple. I pray that you have peace today. Well, you'd be happy to know, continue doing that as I finish up here. You'd be happy to know that I did survive that very first terrifying roller coaster ride. And you know what? That very same day, as my dad likes to remind me, I ended up riding that same roller coaster at least 15 more times. There is a point when we have accomplished those things we were sure we couldn't accomplish. Once we have done those things that we swore we never could have done, the terror subsides. Our fear diminishes. Because then it's not 1,000,001 stories being told of what was okay, what worked out, where God was present, but it becomes our story. It's not until we get to the end of what we know, the end of what we know that we are capable of, and we brush right past that in confidence, or maybe in trembling, like on that roller coaster, I was not confident, but I did it. There is joy on the other side. I know we don't know that, but we live this life of faith, trusting that God is with us, that there will be another side to this. Even this, whatever it is that you are experiencing right now. We live as people of faith. Let us continue to find peace enough for today, and when we wake up, able to breathe, able to live tomorrow, may we ask God for just enough for that day as well. Friends, may we live as people of peace. May we share this peace with all who we encounter, no matter how we interact. May we take this peace of God that has been given to us and share it far and wide, even sometimes through a simple text message. Amen.